Hi, Kitchen Cook here. Today we're going to talk about how to light and operate, and just some general nomenclature of an old Coleman lantern and an old Coleman stove. Forgive me in the background, I have a gumbo going, so I may have to stop and do things, and again, the neighborhood's a little busy, so there may be a little bit of noise in the background, so please forgive the disruptions. So anyway, I have a 228 lantern here, 228F. The difference between the 220 and 228F is the bail. It's a little bit wider, and the vent here, all right, it's a little bit larger. And so, but otherwise, the 220 and 228 are about the same thing. Again, we'll start off with some nomenclature. This is the vent, which is the hat that sits on top of the lantern. It helps retain heat, and it also protects from the wind, and it also helps deflect lighting, so that when it's hanging, things can be visualized a little bit better down below. This is the globe. The globe is clear. They have some that are frosted, picketed, but this is a clear. It looks like a replacement globe at some point. And what it does is it sits here in the cage, and it actually helps protect the mantles and helps retain heat for the flame. Yes, but most of it is to help prevent wind and from blowing and damaging the mantles, and keeping it lit and keeping the temperature warm inside. So we'll go with some of the most obvious things. We have the fuel cap here. Fuel cap, a lot of times there's some issues with the fuel cap because the gasket inside has been, it's just been compressed. It's been in there probably for several decades. It needs to be replaced if it's nice and spongy and it doesn't seal this very well. Some people in a pinch have used O-rings. They can be used in a pinch, but preferably you should use a fuel cap gasket, which can be gotten at a different location. I mean, different online sources. And so anyway, we have the fuel tank, which is referred to as the fount. We have the fuel shutoff valve and fuel control valve as well here. We have this little rod here, and it affects a little needle rod that goes inside the generator. This little thing I'm touching here is the generator. The generator is what allows fuel to go up. This is heated up, and it turns the fuel into the raw fuel into a vapor. And by doing so, it allows this to burn much hotter and much cleaner. When this is turned up and around like this, it turns a little eccentric valve that's inside here. That little eccentric valve makes the needle go up and down in the generator. At the very tip of that little needle rod is a little fine wire. That little fine wire way up at the tip of the generator, there's a little opening, the generator opening, the jet, and sometimes coke and impurities can build up in there. So it helps clean it, and it helps keep it patent. Sometimes during use, sometimes a little bit of crud or coking can flake up and obstruct and occlude the little valve, the generator tip opening. So if you turn this several times, like, well, especially before, to make sure some old crud or coking hasn't developed on the end when it cools down from last use, or while using it, it'll help clean it up, and it'll keep a nice, good, even running and blue flame. And a bright flame. This little thing, if you turn it up just like this, the little needle is pushed all the way forward, and the little wire needle is all the way advanced, and so it's sticking in the generator tip. It can partially obstruct the flow of the gas. This should not be. Some people do. Some people use it, and they can slightly dial down the flame. That shouldn't be done. There have been instances, even though very remote, when this has been left up and somebody's warming or heating the generator with a little butane torch or whatever, however they like to do it, has caused one of these, then the pressure to build up has caused one of these generators to split because the pressure has built up. So when it's up like this, the little tip is, and the little bar tip is up inside the generator, up inside this thing right here. So whenever, after you've moved it several times to clean out the opening, this should remain in the downward position. So the needle is down, and then there's full access to the fuel and vapors coming out without obstruction from the generator tip. What we have here is the little cap cover going to the check valve chamber here. In here, this is this little tube that comes out here is the pump cup tube assembly, and at the very end of this little tube is actually a leather cup. That little leather cup, when moistened with leather oil like neat's foot or even 3-in-1 oil, it keeps it nice and pliable, and it lubricates as it's going down, and it allows air to be pushed into the fount through the check valve. Okay, and some replacements for this, they've put neoprene pump cups. I'm not a big fan of those. They work great for a while, and then they wear out. Then you have to replace them. The leathers, whenever I find them, I replace them with the leather pump cups. They're great because even if you haven't used it in a while, it's a little bit dry, you can always re-moisten it with the neat's foot oil, which is a leather oil, or 3-in-1 oil. In a pinch, you can use some clean, clear 30-weight oil, and just lightly moisten it so it keeps it pliable. So in here, this slides along a check valve rod. That rod is screwed into the check valve. The check valve's resting at the base of this little chamber that's going inside the fount. In that little check valve, they have a little steel ball bearing. When the pressure builds up in the fount, it pushes the little bearing forward, the ball bearing forward, and it helps prevent air and fuel from escaping out. As a secondary safety mechanism, if for some reason that little ball bearing fails or gets gummed up, whenever you push in and you're finished filling the fount with air, you would turn this all the way to the right, and it would screw in and shut off the check valve completely with the check valve rod. So two safety components. Let's see. This is the cage and the bail. This is the burner assembly, and these are the little air tubes that are going down from here. This is where the mixing takes place, up in here. This right here is a little acorn nut, which the valve sits on top. This right again is the generator, and this is the little jam nut that helps hold it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to place the globe back in. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention, the two little white things are actually mantles. Mantles are a little, are kind of like a cotton and what used to be cotton and sometimes cotton nylon mix. They used to have different things like iridium and some other stuff years ago that was slightly radioactive. Not really anything to do any harm or damage. Some people inflate the concern with those. They came from silk lights. Those glow very nicely, but the amount of material that's in it is extremely minor, and it poses no harm or issues. I guess if you were to roll in a whole pile of them and you sit in them for hours on a day, it would cause some issues. But these are made solely from a cotton to nylon mixture, and in there I think there's some type of thorium base with some other type of metals that glow when heated. So that's what they're made today. This size that's being put on here is 21 size mantles, and you tie them on. When the first time you get them, they're a little bit larger, look like little socks. You tie them on, you clip off the ends, and then you take a match or a lighter And before you start the whole process, you actually burn them and let them burn until they're completely burned and it leaves a white ash frame just like that. Now once it's burned, that little white ash frame is somewhat delicate. I mean, you can move around a little bit; they won't break. Some people have had them for years in the same lantern, and they've worked. Sometimes, if you accidentally hit them, or you have the globe off and the wind's blowing hard, you can actually tear or break it. So always bring spare mantles. So again, another reason for keeping the globe on is to protect the mantles. And so they have a nice glow whenever we light it up. It helps illuminate, increase that the brightness and the glow. Let's see. We have this down. We're going to go ahead and place the ventilator back on, and then we'll place the nut on. Now, when you screw in the nut, you don't want to bear down and snug it down really hard, because what happens is, we'll show you what happens. Now, I got this maybe about a year ago. I got it off Marketplace or whatever, and it's been kept up relatively okay for 4 decades old. But what probably happened is somebody had snugged this down really well. And what happens is when the heat from the flame and everything warms up this this vent. This vent is covered by a porcelain, and the porcelain helps protect the metal, and it helps with the heat. And so what happens is when this the metal expands a little bit, and this is hunkered down, what happens is it expands, and because it's hunkered down, it chips, it flakes. So to help prevent that, and what you do is when you sit it down just like this, you put the acorn nut on, and once it just touches the top, you just slightly back off 1/8 of a turn roughly, and then it gives it a room for if it expands so it doesn't cause further damage. Also, this is a 228, so the hat is a little bit wider, and it offers a little bit better downward reflection of light. So when you're camping, you have it up, you get a better display of light over what you're trying to display. There's a little opening here. Some people like to put little sparkers on the inside of here, and they can light for convenience. Some people use this like this, and they light it just like this, and then they turn on the fuel and they light it. You can also use a match. It's just as good. If for some reason your light source or say your sparker can't reach underneath to adequately do it, you can certainly take out the ball nut, the vent, and the globe, light it, and once it's lit, then put the globe, the vent, and the ball nut back. It helps retain heat and protect the mantles. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure this is tight. Okay, this is tightened down so air doesn't leak out. We're also going to turn this at least a turn to a turn and a half to the left, counterclockwise. I want you to notice something here. There's a little opening. Right up in that opening, you have to place your thumb over. So when you turn it, you're actually loosening the check valve rod that's sitting inside the check valve. It allows air thus to go around and go past the check valve, past the ball bearing in a direction downward. Okay, because it's only in a backward direction where the ball bearing creates an obstruction. And so because if you don't put your thumb and you push right here, air just comes out that little hole. Okay, and so we'll turn it back closed just like this, all the way snug, and that is completely shut off. And I'm gonna turn off my gumbo here because it's done. Alrighty, there we go. So what we're gonna do is we have this turned all the way off. We have this on loosely. We have our fuel cap tightened down snug, and what we do, I'll reiterate. What we'll do is we'll turn this several times to make sure the opening is clean. This in a downward position because we want the little wire down and not into the generator tip opening. What we're going to do is we're going to open this up, at least a turn and a half, 2, whatever. And so I'm going to bring this a little bit forward, and then Well, let me see if I put it. It might be a little easier for you to see. Hook that in here, and then I'm gonna pump. I'll probably now I've only filled it up with a little bit for display purposes. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pump it up maybe 40 times, 50, a little bit more. Again, and then once we light it, we are going to have to add some more pressure. What ends up happening is some of the air that's in here, okay, when you push air in here and you only want to fill this font up to at the base of the neck, okay, you don't want to tip this sideways like this so it makes it easier to fill, and to get it all the way to the top, you don't want to do that. You only want to fill it, some people will call it like 3/4 full or whatever, but you only want to fill it up to the neck of the little where the fuel cap is, all right, the little neck of the font right here. Reason being is you still need a space of air of about this much, because you're going to be pumping air in here. You need that air to push down and create pressure. It displaces, it pushes, and it creates pressure inside the font. When you have that pressure, it allows the fuel to go up through the fuel air tube, or the pickup tube, but it's called a fuel air tube, to go up it. And so when it goes up, it makes its way up to the generator. If you can't get adequate air in there and pressure, because you filled it up too much, it can create a lot of pressures with lighting this lantern. Another thing too, if this is a new to you lantern, or you've been having it a while, gunk can build up over many years, especially if somebody's used RUG, which is the acronym for regular unleaded gas. You can use regular unleaded gas in it, it will burn. The thing is, if you do use it, you need to, after, like you say you're on a weekend and that's what you were forced to use because you couldn't find a place that had Crown, which is a white naphtha gas, or your Coleman fuel, or guess what, you ran out and you still need it. You can still run a regular unleaded. The problem is it has ethanol and other octane boosters and other stuff like that just gum up and varnish if it sits in there for a long period of time. So if someone's used that in there, it can create a thick varnished gum under the underside, and it can clog up your fuel air tube, where you would have to take it off and clean it. That's a bit more of a chore. But regular unleaded gas can be used with these generators. The thing is, there was someone on YouTube, Frank, I can't remember his last name, but he has a website called Old Town Coleman. I think Frank Bebb, and he had one where he ran unleaded fuel and one lantern, and regular Coleman fuel or Crown naphtha white gas in another one. And I forgot, it was a substantial amount of hours. I forgot how many fonts that he ran through that lantern until the generator clogged up. And so it was quite impressive, the amount of times that he ran through there. So someone telling you, hey, you run a couple of rounds of regular unleaded through, you're going to clog up your generator. Well, that's not quite true. But it will cause the generator to become occluded and junked up quicker than if you were to use white gas or Coleman fuel. And so it is preferably to try to use naphtha or white gas. Well, that being said, let's go ahead and get going. Okay, we have it turned. Okay, we're gonna turn it. It's closed. We're gonna open 1.5 to 2, and we're gonna start pumping. This is closed. All right. Put this up here. I'm gonna start pumping. Okay, so I did about 60 roughly. And the reason why I did is because I didn't put that much fuel, so I had to put more air to create more pressure. If it was quite full, I might only have to go to 35 or 40. Just remember. Now, once we start it up, we will have to add some more pressure, because that fuel air tube, when you're going to open this up, you're going to turn it a quarter of a turn, sometimes a little bit more, especially if you have a fuel air tube that may be a little junky. And I have a feeling this one may be a little junky. And so I may have to open it up a little bit more. And so you're going to listen for a hissing sound and a spitting sound, and that lets you know that there is fuel coming up and spitting out of the generator and soaking those little mantles. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to open it up. You may not be able to hear, but that's what you're going to be listening for. I'm going to open it up. Okay, I hear spitting. Open it a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Yeah, I must have a dirty tube. Okay, these are gonna light. I'm turning it up just a little bit. There we go. They're going right now. And it may flame up a little bit. What we're doing, once that's heated, once it's lit, it's actually heating. I'm gonna turn it up a little bit here. Oh, it just went out. Must have a dirty generator or a fuel air tube. Let me pump it up a little bit more. And again, this is good because this will actually happen out when you're camping. I'm going to pump it up because when you open the control valve, you're using some of the air in the front. So when you are open at a quarter of a turn, you have a mixture of air and fuel, okay? Because you're just not spewing raw fuel up into the top, and because if you do that, then it'll create a huge issue, okay? You'll have raw fuel and you have a huge yellow ball. So when you open up a quarter turn, you're having a mixture of air and a little bit of fuel until you can get those mantles lit. And you can get the generator hot enough. Once the generator's about 30 seconds to a minute, or a little bit more if it's really cold outside, then you would open it up all the way. And then when you open it up all the way, inside the fuel air tube, there's a little needle that will push down. That will lift up, and by doing so, it will allow more raw fuel to go to the generator, and thus you have more fuel, more vapor, and it burns a lot brighter. Okay, we'll try this again. And just to make sure there's no carbon or anything, I'm going to redo this again. I'm going to clean this up. All right. And sometimes where you're lighting, if you're having issues, if you turn this, it can help it can help clean inside that generator if it's a little dirty. I'm going to open it up. I hear air. To open it up a little bit more. All right, I had to open it up a little bit more. There's a bit of a fireball, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And so even if you have a little bit of fireball like that, don't panic. You have protection from the vent, and you also have some protection from that globe, okay? And so you just dial it down a little bit, or you turn it off completely, okay? I turned it back a little bit, and then I allowed the fuel to come up through. Now I will tell you, there's probably an issue with that generator. I probably need to clean out the generator and replace it. Normally, if you a quarter of a turn or a little bit more, the fuel flows through it much more freely, and you're able to light that a lot easier. Okay, so this is what you see normally when it lights up. It heats up for a little bit, and it's still having a mixture of air and fuel. Okay, and then it's heating it usually after about again about 30 seconds to a minute. And then we'll turn it up completely. All right, and then we've lost some pressure in there because we actually we were using the air to help bring up the fuel. So I'll pump it up a little bit more, and by you should also see a little bit brighter. And when I'm finished, you may be able to even hear a little hiss. I will probably have to change that generator and probably break this down and clean the fuel air tube down at the bottom. I've been running this for about a year. I've always had a little bit of issues starting it, not much. But it looks like I'm probably gonna have to break it down and clean it. But if you listen, you can hear a little bit of a hiss. And in the evenings at night, I'll tell you, when you're camping or you're cooking, that is a very enjoyable sound from childhood. At least for me it was. When this is heating, the top of this will become darker. Does not mean you did anything wrong. The heat on this causes the porcelain to darken. That's perfectly normal. Be very careful around this. This will get very hot. Believe it or not, if you're sitting near this, or this is inside, if you've lit outside, you brought it into a cabin, and once you're inside, with adequate ventilation, this will actually put off some heat. This thing actually can also heat. Some people ice fish with these little things right next to them at nighttime. It provides light and warmth. So you could easily warm your hands if it's cold and you're camping and you're cooking. So not only is the lantern good for light, it can also be a heat source. So anyway, I've waffled on enough. I'm going to go ahead and turn this down. I'm going to turn it off. And then I'll tell you, once you've turned it off, you shut it down completely. You turn it all the way to the right. All right, it may take, about 30 seconds to a minute or a little bit longer to shut off. Just a little bit longer to shut off. You'll see the glow of those slowly get out. There's still gas and vapors inside that generator. So the heat from it is still expelling vapors, so it's still hot. So even after like a minute or so, it could still be very well up in the, up into the chambers up in there. There could be a slight flame and low gas burning. So wait for at least 5-10 minutes, and it should have been long before that, but at least that before you start messing with it or anything like that. Wait sure till it's adequately cooled off. You never want to open this cap while this thing is running. If you open this cap while this thing is running or it's very hot, you have vapors coming out of there. You can have a nice little accident or a little gas ball or flare up. It can be very dangerous. If you're messing with the lamp for the very first time, it's always good to have some gloves or even a fire extinguisher close by. You never know what's going to happen. Also, I should mention, when you have this for the first time and you pressurize it, before you try lighting it and you put some fuel in here, check the sides and the bottoms and all that stuff. Check to see if you see like any little pinholes or weeping of fuel. Certainly if you see that, do not attempt to light this at all. Certainly, if you haven't opened any of this up and you see fuel coming out from the base or anything like that, certainly do not try to light it. You need to look at it to repair it. If you find rust, deep rust spots, or you find little pinholes in these fonts, do not attempt to try to repair them. You can find a replacement font because these things run off of pressure, and there are people who try to weld, they try to JB weld, all kinds of other stuff like that. If those things fleck off and it's pressurized and gas leaks, it can be very dangerous to a family in a cabin, tent, or even someone can get hurt very bad. So treat these with respect. They're fun, they're great, and they're useful. The power's out. It's always great to have one of these in your home. So thank you very much. It's been out completely, and thank you for watching.